It was like I was there. Words that are really all too familiar to us as gamers, but what does it really take for a game to put you there? I want to welcome you to Pixel Report, a show about doing a little bit of digging in the digital world and seeing what new perspectives we might be able to find. For this episode, as you can guess, we are going to be looking at the 2017 Prey made by Arcane Studios. And moving from macro to micro, we are going to take a look and see if they were able to build a believable universe in a digital world. For every jump in technology or in the generational history of games, developers are allowed more and more freedom to tell their stories through the games themselves rather than through text or dialogue or pure exposition. From earlier games like Deus Ex and Thief, who use more basic or rudimentary from our standards ways of introducing and telling about their world, to new and more recent games which use new technology that allowed developers to build more believable spaces, such as higher object count, improved textures, and more connected scripting. Games like BioShock, the new Deus Ex games, and of course the previous Arcane games, Dishonored 1 and Dishonored 2. Knowing Arcane Studios and their recent Dishonored series, you can easily predict some of the elements they will include in this new Prey. Player flexibility, some type of super or supernatural power, as well as some very, very strong world building. Now it's up to the developers to pick how that history is going to be shown to the player. Some games go more simple and show a montage of video clips of news clippings and other happenings around the world. Others use text to draw them in, which allow them to be very, very detailed in their description of how their world works. But a true task in video games is using the medium of games themselves to tell that story. This can be done through things like dialogue, visuals, and the gameplay itself. But at the heart of those three, what is really needed to tell that history is questions posed. Not questions posed by the developer, but questions that naturally come about from the gamer in relation to the game itself. A reference for those questions are a very simple past, present, future. What was, what is, and what will be. What was? What happened before you got there? What brought the world to where it is now? From you until the beginning of time is where the developer has the freedom to explore those stories, to set up that world that you are about to start in. The what is a very simple, where am I? This is most easily connected to location and current status. And what will be? These are the harder questions of motive. What is my goal, and where am I going, and where do I go next? Now, rather than have the player wrestle with these complex questions throughout the entire game, it is important for the player to focus on just one or two. That's why it does not normally take very long for a game to start fleshing out the settings as one of those additional questions, whether it's what was or what will be. It is this beginning that is the most crucial part for a developer in connection to developing the believability and relatability of the game world, because it is the line that the hook is attached to draw the player back in. Now, what is that hook, you might ask? Now, the way that Prey does this, you might find very familiar. I find the best way to describe it is the "we are not in Kansas anymore" moment.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
It is the process of telling a little bit of the story, then the developer changes what is expected. Now, you can't have a curtain reveal without first setting the stage. These setups can take many different forms, from Dunwall to Rapture and now Talos 1 in Prey. The player is never thrown into the thick of things right off the bat. There is always a gradual lowering into the depths of the world that needs to take place, quite literally in the case of BioShock, as we listen to Andrew Ryan in the bathysphere. After all the questions have been posed, this is the switch. This is the raising of the curtain. A switch can take many different forms, whether it's realizing that an underwater utopia is being torn apart, the leader of a disease-ravaged city gets killed, ushering in a brand new regime, or in this case, we see the true side of our game intro. In this case, it is our second awakening. Most easily connected to the Clockwork Mansion level in Dishonored 2, where the game created a believability in that extra mechanical depth, that seeing of the true world beyond our initial exposure, to see behind the clock face and brush up against the gears and the clicking and clanking and gnawing while still knowing what happens on the surface. That is the experience that we are given. We're given superficial outside look that is controlled so that only we can see what they want us to see. And then we see the truth after that second awakening. And that very much is a second awakening. With the breaking of the window, we tear ourselves out of that perceived world and into this new one. We see quite literally beyond the one-way mirror into the real world. That change, that clash of our expectation of the first few minutes and the reality of those next few minutes is that switch. After breaking that glass, that is the world, not that we expected, but the reality of what the developers have done to the world, the history and the space station that make it new to us. Simply put, it is that switch that occurs which allows the game to answer some of those questions that came out in those first few minutes. Most importantly, it is that question of what is your place in the world, your setting and your footing, and finally finding your footing on the actual Talos 1 station despite our preconceived ideas. Now, the other question that is answered but not fully is the what was. Much like the similar games BioShock and Dishonored, the location and bits of the history are quickly established to grow the story on top of. In this case, the history that we know is about aliens, death, and abilities, neuromods. For many games, this provides enough to answer bits and pieces of the what was, in knowing where the game came from and what it's meant to be. What is, as you see the world as your new twisted playground. But for the last question, the what will be, that is something that we'll have to grapple with on our way through Talos 1. In our next episode of Pixel Report, we will take a closer look at how a believable world can create the platform for natural gameplay and thriving exploration. Now, this is just the beginning of this new series, so remember to like, comment, or subscribe. Do whatever you need to do. In the end, this has been Devin J, and we will catch you on the next one.